بجد قلتم زوجي دفين زركز እግዚአብሔር ካባል ሁሉ ይሞ ለዛው ጊዜአ
ሰላማት ከመይ ቀኒኹም I'll start with Tigrinya but because ጋሻና ትግርኛ ቁሩብ ስለዝፈልጥ በዓሉ ሰላም ክብለኩም እዩ በትግርኛ ገይሩ ግዳሐሪ በእንግሊሽ ክንቅጽሎ ኢና but what I want to say is today we have a special guest Mr. Thomas Mountain, an amazing person who has a mind of his own, unique, and one of my favorite quotes of all time on the social media or media that he's kind of branded is "Salam and rain for Eritrea." He's the one that created that message for our people from many years ago. So with that said, we have with us a journalist, independent journalist that is, lifelong activist, educator, you name it. Welcome to Solo Media, Mr. Thomas Mountain, and I'll give you the mic. I want you to say something in Tigrinya for everyone.
Salam, Lahando. Hey, it's Nishte Tigrinya. I lived in Eritrea a long time, but I have language problem learning. But it's good to be on your show. It's about time, I guess.
Absolutely. We also have with us Matkal, who's going to be joining us with this interview. And people have been waiting for you for a long time. Where are you these days? I know a lot of people think you're in Eritrea, but where are you these days?
No, at the height of the COVID problems we were having in 2021, we couldn't get medicine. My wife has a serious heart condition, so we couldn't get medicine because the shipping was shut down. So we had to come back to the U.S. So we've been here. I'm living in Lynchburg, helping take care of my grandchildren. My daughter's finishing up her teaching degree in Lynchburg, Virginia.
Well, that's not too far away from us, so it's great to know that you are here with us. We will try to take advantage of you while we got you. I know you plan to go back to Eritrea as well once things get a little bit more settled down with your wife and family. But with that said, who is Thomas Mountain? I know a lot of people know you as, independent journalist and cultural icon who's been a part of our community, but you also have a rich history. And I want you to go back to your family beginning in Hawaii and give us a little timeline of who Thomas Mountain is.
Well, I describe myself as a historian and educator. And I lived and reported from Eritrea from 2006 to 2021. And at one time, I was the most widely distributed independent journalist in Africa. So I started my support for the Eritrean peoples in 1983 when I was first introduced to a representative of the EPLF in Los Angeles by Comrade Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael. Mm-hmm. Kwame's policy was he was a strong supporter of Eritrea. His policy was to have, whenever possible, a representative of EPLF give the opening remarks when he spoke. So when I was invited to meet him in 1983, I flew up from Hawaii and went to his program and I'd heard of the EPLF as well as the TPLF. So I was familiar with who they were, who Shabi was, but in Hawaii, there's no chance to meet anybody there. So when in Los Angeles, there was a guy, brother was there speaking and made the opening remarks. So I bought a T-shirt and a button and subscribed to Adulis, a magazine, a newsletter. So that was my first contribution. Later on, I arranged for my mother's. She was a member of the founding member of the Unitarian Church in Honolulu, where I was from, and they used to contribute. I think it was $500 every year, earmarked to the Unitarian Universalist Association, earmarking it for Eritrea from 1983 on. And when the war broke out with Wayani and CPLF in 1998, I was in the music business part-time, and I was up in London one of the reasons was to find out what was going on. Because after independence, all the Eritreans I knew went back to Eritrea. So I lost touch with what was going on. And I didn't have any, the Adulis newsletter stopped, and I didn't have any real way of finding out what was going on. So as a part of going to London as a music business trip, I was introduced to a Eritrean ex-fighter, a woman named Almaz Welde, and we hit it off. We ended up getting married. So I brought her to the United States, and we've been together since, 1998. So she basically really, pardon?
If I could interject, that's when you also joined us on the Dahai virtual network. And so continue, go ahead.
Yeah, right. So, I pretty much learned everything about Eritrea from her. I mean, she brought me up to speed. I was just sort of wandering in the wilderness, and I didn't, she clued me in to what was really going on. So, from my wife went to the field when she was 14 years old. I mean, in 1977. So she was one of the class of 77. So she didn't grow up with her family. She grew up with the EPLF. So that's her soul, really, her consciousness. So,
that's an amazing story. For many of you, just look at this long-term relationship that was created. First of all, we'll go back and talk about a little bit about Kwame Ture, Stockley Carmichael, who's one of the most widely followed freedom fighters for Black people in general for long time. So the fact that he was even connected to the EPLF to me is brilliant, because I knew that EPLF was part of that whole movement that went on in the struggle years in the 70s and 80s here in the United States through public diplomacy, through solidarity movements and that kind of thing. But what I wanted to touch on now is, you coming from Hawaii to Los Angeles and being a part of this whole, Eritrean cause, and then you meeting an Eritrean wife many years later. That connection is just mind-boggling, and so for us, we consider you you're Eritrean long time ago, you're Eritrean now, and we're very happy to have you here. And everybody wants to hear a little bit more about why is it that you got other than being with your wife, why is it so important for you to be a part of the Eritrean struggle?
Well, my background is I was a revolutionary in the United States. I mean, I don't believe in voting or any of that stuff. To me, it's like, and I've always supported since I was a teenager, the armed struggle for national liberation. And, Kwame Ture, of course, was a very strong, prominent supporter of that. So, it is one of the reasons why I wanted to hook up with him, because, the organizations I'd worked with has sort of gone off the deep end. And see, growing up in Hawaii, I was the only white kid in the school, my elementary school, about 800 kids. And my peers' parents had grown up on the sugar and pineapple plantations in Hawaii, which used to dominate the economy. And they grew up in the days before there was unions. And so literally white men rode around in horse with whips. And many of them saw their parents and family get whipped. So there was a great deal of animosity towards whites, who in Hawaii they called haulis. So, and grew up my parents are school teachers. My father came to Hawaii in 1938 to teach at a native Hawaiian school called the Kamehameha Schools. And so my mother came after him to get married there. They'd been engaged before he moved to Hawaii. And so my father moved to 38 a long time ago. So I was born and raised in Hawaii, but we lived in the middle of a very working class neighborhood. And I was like the only white kid in the school of 800. Matter of fact, as best I knew, of the school district of 5 or 6 schools around us, I was the only white kid. So, there was a lot of animosity towards whites, and I was always questioning. I think that's what my sister was the first white kid ever to go to that school, my older sister. And when I asked her later on in my life, why do you think, because I was always very interested in Black history. And I asked her, why do you think I was interested in Black history? I just was drawn to it. And she said, because of how we grew up, being the only white kid and facing all of this antagonism for our complexion, So I realized I was drawn to it. So from about 1981, the cultural aspect was my main interest. And so, I started off with reggae music because it was the most political. And then I was drawn to African music. And I used to actually even be a DJ. I was the first DJ that did reggae and African music on commercial radio in Honolulu way back in 1987.
Wow.
So we used to, with a Jamaican friend of mine, we used to spin reggae music in the community among the kids, trying to spread this consciousness that reggae is about the best we can at the time. And then, when I was introduced to the Shabia, to EPLF, then, it took another leap forward because I realized that this is a conscious political movement, and it's really fighting, the only movement in Africa that was successful in the armed struggle for national liberation, where they completed the liberation struggle, because there were other African countries like South Africa or Zimbabwe or Angola or Mozambique. They had an armed struggle, but it ended up becoming a referendum and an independence and elections and the IMF and the World Bank, and there was neocolonialism. So Eritrea is the only country that didn't accept neocolonialism, that defeated on the battlefield their occupying colonial army, in this case the Ethiopians, and drove them out of their country. And it took over the country at the point of a gun, not through elections or through anything else. So Eritrea has always been the role model for me because, I've called Eritrea the Cuba of Africa, because the Cuba is the only country in Africa, the only government in Africa that came to power through the armed struggle. And Eritrea is really the only country in Africa.
And I want you to elaborate on that, because I followed you so closely over the years, and there are some haters out there who claim that you said Cuba's only, and they try to claim that was wrong because the way Cuba came was a little different than Eritrea. But elaborate on that a little bit, and because you have a good explanation for that.
Well, Cuba, they took up arms. Castro went up in the mountains and took up arms and defeated the U.S.-backed Comprador Army there of Batista and drove them out of the country through armed struggle. That's the only successful revolution like that in Africa. Everybody else came through quote-unquote elections, democracy, right? Western democracy. So, and Eritrea has done the same thing in Africa. Like I said, all these other African countries ended up having Margaret Thatcher show up and make a referendum, and choose their leadership through elections. Well, Eritrea has democracy, real democracy, because when you define democracy, you don't define it through voting. You define democracy through social equality, and that's where Eritrea, Eritrea is in effect, after living there for 15 years, I really like to speak to the economic opportunities that have the potential for people in the diaspora, especially the youth in the diaspora, which they can contribute to the development of Eritrea. And since I lived there for 15 years, I had a chance to firsthand, research and see what really is possible there, what the potential are. So, when I speak to the youth, I say, look, Eritrea is in a transition point with the income from mining just starting to come in again. And with, this copper mine in Asmara, and then the potash mine coming online, and then, with another new copper mine out in the Gashbarka region, and potentially this big gold mine in Alpha Exploration is exploring. Eritrea is like on the verge of getting a major influx of capital, hard currency that they can develop the country with. Discretionary spending. In other words, they can invest in the infrastructure in a much bigger way than they've been able to. It's no longer just going to be survival in Eritrea. It's going to be actually expansion of the economy.
Talking about that, you went into several youth events, and we want to highlight that because I know you're talking about the topic, and you just said something about the economic opportunities that are coming up, but you did make yourself available to many different festivals, and you explained a lot of information to the young generation. And like you said, the chances of Eritrea going forward is very, very, it seems very bright. So with that said, talk a little bit about your experience with Eritrean youth, the Eritrean community, and how important it is that people start thinking about investing in Eritrea.
Well, the last time actually I was at an Eritrean festival was in 2016 in Stockholm, Sweden, my first time to Stockholm, Sweden. And this was after the two big demonstrations in 2015, 2016 in Geneva. So I was very warmly received in both the demonstrations when I spoke. And so they asked me to come up and do a seminar at the festival in Stockholm. So I did actually 2 seminars, one for the general public, which is mostly older people. I mean, a lot of youth, but then one just for the youth. Now, both of these are on my Facebook page. Not the best quality, but they're okay. And from, Thomas C. Mountain on Facebook, you can see these videos where I spoke about what was, I saw coming. Now, of course, things have changed a lot since then because, in 2016, the game was over, right? Famously. I mean, 2018, it was game over for Oyani. Yeah. And then the war broke out in 2020. And so, there's been so much turmoil since 2016. But, to see TPLF going for years and years, I was saying, one day TPLF's going to be gone. And everybody said, oh, no, you're crazy. America's going to keep them forever. Well, one day they were gone. And they tried to come back with the CIA support, but they're gone right now. So that major threat's passed.
So let's talk a little bit about that because your continued research, your continued journalism. I know you still follow a lot of political activities going on. There's a lot of movement going on lately to try and revive the TPLF. What do you think of the chances of that surviving?
Well, Ethiopia is right on the verge of a cliff. And I've been asked to write articles about it, but it's really hard because it's very difficult to get reliable information from inside the country. I mean, it's clear there's a civil war going on. 4 different sections of Fano are fighting. Whether they're going to be able to unite and think, build a new Ethiopia is another question because they're the major armed organization that's capable of replacing the present gangsters that are running the country, the Abiy Ahmed. So, that's, I mean, at this point, I can't really say what's going on in Ethiopia. It's like, we just have to wait and see. But, when I
think the TPLF can survive?
Well, I'm actually in the middle of writing, and my next article is entitled 70 Years of U.S. Covert War Against Eritrea. 70 years. Covert war. So, and it's ongoing. And, so the Eritrean youth have to realize that even when it's quote unquote peace, there's a covert war the United States is waging against Eritrea because Eritrea is the threat of a good example. It came to power through the armed struggle. They refused all the IMF and World Bank predatory loans. They're building the economy independent of Western control. They haven't fallen into this trap of elections, bought, sold, and rigged elections. And it's a democratic, popular government that's building the future for the country. But Eritrea's faced major challenges. I mean, after the invasion of the TPLF in 1998 to 2000, and at one point 40% of the people in the country were internally displaced. I mean, look, if you imagine in the United States, if 40% of the population in a matter of weeks was driven from their homes with the clothes on their back, we're talking about over 120 million people were driven from their homes with nothing, and they would have to take care of these people. There'd be mass starvation. None of that happened in Eritrea. They were able to provide for their people. But then, after they recovered from that, they got hammered by this drought, the first 2-year drought in history, 2003, 2004, the direct result of this climate disaster that is mainly be caused by the Western industrial powers that's destroyed the environment. So Eritrea gets this where the rains fail in a country that's 70% agricultural based, rain-fed agriculture. The rains failed not just for 1 year, 2 years in a row. And this is just a few years after 40% of the population lost everything. So, then again in 2008, 2009, when I was living in Eritrea, there was another 2-year drought where the rain-fed agriculture failed. So the government is, this is the backbone of the economy, and to lose it all like that. It's just the government is struggling just to keep everybody fed, So major challenges, right? I mean, the country is getting hammered from the right side, the left side, and not everything out of their control. And of course, the Americans having this covert war against them. 2009, they put sanctions on Eritrea. Why? Because Eritrea is coming out of this successful. I mean, at the end of 2-year drought, when Eritrea is already suffering, they survived, okay? And this is the second 2-year drought in less than 10 years. And Eritrea survives and is coming out on its own 2 feet, still with its head up and still struggling, still fighting, the United States put sanctions on them to try to block the mining industry developing. And the sanctions were really directed at the new Bisha gold mine, which failed. The gold mine started. So Eritrea, once again persevered. Now today in Eritrea, it's another bad situation because the war in Sudan and all this chaos in Ethiopia, there's our 2 biggest neighbors. And there's all the economy that we've developed with them is all gone now. So once again, everything's on the shoulders of the Eritrean people, especially in the diaspora, to contribute to help their country. Fortunately, mining's developing, and there's the light's at the end of the tunnel, right?
If I could interject, talking about our neighbors, do you feel like it is because Eritrea has overcome all these obstacles? Now the neighbors are being used to sort of destabilize the region. Do you think that's part of the picture?
Well, initially about Sudan, I was confused. I didn't get it right, but now but it's clear. There's just like 2 sets of gangsters that are fighting it out in Sudan. Who's going to have the power, right? And see, the Sudan had a lot of oil for a long time, and maybe 50, 60 billion dollars that Sudan had its hands on in cash. Where'd all that money go? Sudan used to be the breadbasket of that part of Africa. Sudan used to export wheat. Now Sudan's has been a bigger country for a long time under this gangster Bashir regime. So, this is not a new problem in Sudan. It's just like in Ethiopia, it's not a new problem, right? We had a lot of hopes that Abiy Ahmed was going to do what he said he was going to do, and he didn't do any of it. He just turned into another thief, right? Another gangster. So those things are, of course, the Americans are doing their best to destabilize in Ethiopia. On the other hand, in Sudan, it's, you have external players involved as well, but most of these things are, out of Eritrea's control. The best Eritrea can do is like try to mediate and, stick to a principled position. And I mean, in the case of 2020, when TPLF tried to do their CIA-backed coup, Eritrea had to intervene. I mean, they had to. Abiy came and begged them to intervene, and they did. Mm-hmm. And they wiped out the backbone of the TPLF army. So Eritrea doesn't want to do that, but they just weren't going to let TPLF come back to Eritrea and do damage.
Right.
So they had no
well,
choice.
It also affected us in the border areas. They were infringing into our territories as well. So that had something to do with it. But with that said, one of the only other countries that seems to be doing well with us right now, Somalia, without going into detail, Somalia was obviously, a state that was going through so much crises. But lately, you can see that the friendship with Eritrea seems to have kind of turning it gradually into more of a better position than most in the region. Can you talk a little bit about Somalia and then also touch up a little bit about the region? And then we'll try to go to a different topic and we'll try to get the public to ask you some questions.
Well, I recently had an article published. It's on The High as well, but on Covert Action Magazine and a bunch of African websites called U.S. Steps Up Intervention in Somalia, where I basically laid out the history of Somalia and why the U.S. hates Somalia like it hates Eritrea. Because Siad Barre was the first really effective Pan-Africanist when the independence movement started in Africa. I mean, Siad Barre made a home away from home. I mean, a safe haven and support for people fighting for national liberation from South Africa to Mozambique to Angola, to Zimbabwe to Eritrea. So, and that was a thorn in the side of the United States, right at the mouth of the Bab al-Mandeb, the strategically critical gateway between the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, through which all the commerce passed between Europe and Asia. So the United States has always been very concerned about control, since World War II, control of the Bab al-Mandeb, this critically strategic area of the world, the Horn of Africa. So Siad Barre was there, and this was a problem for the United States. And I mean, as soon as he died, the United States invaded Somalia in 1992. I mean, they didn't come in there to do any good. They came in there to make sure another Siad Barre did not rise up and unite the Somali people. So, there's all this Black Hawk Down. Really what that was about was they attacked a gathering of the senior leadership of all of Somalia. Over 250 of the clans and religious leaders had gathered in Mogadishu to put together a new leadership coalition to bring peace to Somalia and unity to Somalia. And the Americans attacked and killed almost all of them. This is what the Black Hawk Down, all white, racist, white supremacist helicopter unit went in and did this massacre. And it enraged the Somali people, but it basically brought an end to any possibility of Somalia becoming a reunited country. So that was the point of the Americans' invasion. So to this day, Americans don't want to see an independent nationalist Somali government close to Eritrea. But Eritrea is working hard. I mean, they've been training thousands and thousands, over 10,000 already, another 5,000 due to be finished up training, I think, the end of this year, of Somali police who are becoming very professional in their military abilities to go in and basically put an end to this Al-Shabaab terrorist group and to provide stability for the Somali society. But right now, Somalia is kind of a mess. But historically, Somalia was the ones that supported Eritrea. Isaias Afwerki used to travel on a Somali diplomatic passport, which was invaluable, almost more than the weapons Somalia could give them, was this diplomatic passport so they could travel and build support. So Eritreans know this, and they know they owe Somalia. And, so there's a tie.
With that said, also, if you could add a little bit on the whole little scheme that was done by the Ethiopian Prime Minister into going and making a deal with the Somaliland and trying to act like Somaliland was part of the deal that they were trying to work with.
Well,
the Somalian state. So
Abiy Ahmed is in bad shape. I mean, his situation is deteriorating almost by the day. I mean, Fano sent their fighters inside and actually assassinated some of the senior gangsters inside Addis Ababa for the first time. So the four factions are steadily encroaching upon the Addis Ababa. So Abiy Ahmed is growing increasingly desperate. He and his cronies have stolen most of the foreign currency, and they can't even pay the African Development Bank a few $100 million. There's billions of dollars supposed to be going out of the country every year, paying off to the IMF and World Bank instead of helping the Ethiopian people. And Abiy Ahmed's stealing a lot of money, so there's no money left, and he's grasping at straws. I mean, he's kind of in a fantasy land. I mean, the idea that the Somali people are going to allow Ethiopia to come in and take their land and build a port, Ethiopia is going to own it? No, it's a fantasy. But Abiy Ahmed is trying to sell this nationalism. We're going to have the Red Sea. What? Eritrea's on the Red Sea. Somalia is not on the Red Sea.
Right.
So they say we're going to have the Red Sea. What are they saying? Oh, we're going to have our port again. No, none of this is going to happen. His days are numbered. It's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when Abiy Ahmed's going to get run out of town. I mean, I've been joking around saying, "Oh, Mengistu said, I finished I rehabbed my guest quarters here in Zimbabwe. You can come and stay here because Shabi is going to run. You're going to get run out of Ethiopia too, so you can be here."
One of the questions we got from the audience was about, will the current Israeli war, have any effect on Africa? That's what they're asking. So if you could answer that question, maybe.
Well, I think the Israeli war has triggered a crisis in the Horn of Africa, where the Ansarallah, we call the Houthis in Yemen, has come out with their missiles and said, Israel can't pass, and America, you can't pass either. What? I mean, this is America's worst nightmare. This is why they went into Somalia. This is why they supported, Eritrea becoming part of Ethiopia, so that they wouldn't be in a situation where somebody could say, America, you can't go through here, and anybody that supports America can't pass through the Bab al-Mandeb. So, the Houthis they've done this in solidarity with the Palestinian people. The Yemeni people have been faced with a war, and they've been bombarded and had blockades put on them by the U.S.-backed regimes from the Persian Gulf, the Arab regimes from the Persian Gulf, and the Yemeni people have basically had a genocide against them. More people have died in Yemen than they're ever going to die in Gaza from this genocide. It lasted for 7 years. So there's a massive feeling of solidarity among the Yemeni people towards the Palestinian people. They have a common enemy.
If you recall back a few years ago, a lot of articles being written about the axis of the axis of what do they call them? I forgot. It was Yemen, Sudan, and somebody were attacking Ethiopia. Collectively, the three of them were being promoted as the group that's going to take Eritrea on and get rid of Eritrea. So, with that said, the funny part about it is, all three of them are unstable at the moment, and who has the last laugh? Obviously, Eritrea, because we stood we stood our ground. So, if you talk a little bit about that, I would appreciate it also, because that was a big news in the old days.
Well, way back in, I think it's 2009, at the end of the second 2-year drought, some idiot from I call them the Create a Crisis group, wrote that, there's going to be Eritrea is going to be a failed state. There's going to be regime change in Eritrea. Of course, end of a 2-year drought, times are hard. I mean, we had beggars knocking on our door coming in from the villages because they didn't have anything to eat. The government's having to feed the people, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it's like, what everybody else has failed. Eritrea is going forward. The economy is growing. I mean, it's about to take a major step forward. That's one of the things I really want to talk about, because, concretely, it's one thing to say, we support Eritrea, this and that. But if you're youth and you really don't want to live in America, which I don't blame you, you want to contribute to something, be part of the solution, not part of the problem, Eritrea is the place to be for Eritrean youth outside in the diaspora. Now, it's not easy because Eritrea times are still hard. I mean, my wife's there now, and it's like electric cuts and, water shortages. And, these things are going to pass, but it's been a long time. And it's been, and with the neighbors being in war and chaos, the Eritrean people's life's not easy. But, the future, though, is starting to look more clear in terms of development. And so, when Isaias was meeting in China, and then Isaias met with Putin in Russia, and then the Russian Navy shows up, and so there's a lot of and all these Chinese companies, all the mines in Eritrea now are all Chinese owned.
Right.
So,
one question that's coming up, which I find interesting: what is the motive for Abiy to be part of the naval force in the Red Sea? Do you have any?
This is propaganda for him. He's trying to appeal to really, which basically but originally was a chauvinism from left over from the Abyssinian Empire. It's like, hey, we're going to have the Red Sea again. What do you call it? Mengistu lost it, and Meles couldn't get it back, but Abiy will get it back. This is like support Abiy, desperado, right? I mean, to me, I don't, I've warned people that, don't take Abiy says too seriously, because, well, one thing, he can't even deal with basically a militia army in Fano, let alone a hardcore, well-trained, battle-hardened Eritrean military that destroyed supposedly the strongest army in Africa, the TPLF, in 2000, in a matter of weeks. Killed something like 50,000 of their best troops. So I've just wiped them out, right? So, I mean, this Eritrea is strong. Shabi is strong. They don't have to worry militarily about Shabi. I mean, it's one thing good about the connection with Russia is because militarily Russia has promised Eritrea support, and that means that they're going to modernize a lot of the Eritrean defense forces. I mean, drones and things like that. Eritrea needs these things in this modern warfare. But I mean, other than that, I mean, Eritrean armored and artillery battalions are legendary. Nobody's going to mess with Eritrea. Eritrea's going to destroy them.
But do you think also it's the desire of the population, the people in the diaspora, everyone connecting, uniting, and people like you who are also a part of our solidarity movement? We've had some other guests in the past on this show as well that were solidarity with our cause, because it's a just cause, it's a true cause, and it's not like we are out there picking up fights. We're just trying to say, leave us alone so we can advance and live as a society. So do you think that also plays a part in this?
Well, like I said, Eritrea is the threat of a good example, the role model for independent, self-sufficient African freedom fighters is Eritrea. And as the rest of the continent starts to catch on to this is a threat to the Western hegemony, because you look at even the French now in the Sahel. They've got 3 countries now that are kicking them out. They've got Niger that's kicking out the Americans, telling the American military to get out. I mean, whoa, this is a critically important American drone base that they use for intelligence gathering, and they're having to pack their bags and leave. Big deal, right? So, Eritrea stands there and everybody can look and say, we don't have to be under control of the IMF and the World Bank. Look, Eritrea is not. We don't have to kneel down to the United States. Look, Eritrea doesn't. So, the rest of Africa is starting to catch on. You started to get that feeling for the last year or two. I really noticed. I mean, I remember dreaming about the Ethiopian and Eritrean people demonstrating together someday in Washington, D.C. That was just a dream, right? And I used to talk about that, and people said, this guy is crazy. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And then we saw it happen. I mean, I was crying when I was watching. I couldn't help it. It's like, oh my God, our dream come true. So, right. I mean, the Ethiopian people are not going to forget that Eritrea is their friends, and they're not going to go back to war with Eritrea. There may be elements within Ethiopia that want to do that, but they're not going to be supported by the Ethiopian people. That's a hard-earned lesson the Ethiopian people have learned. And so I'm confident that the Ethiopian people in general are now are more united now than ever with Eritrea. But it's a question of leadership, right? And see, the Americans are threatened by this because as the Eritrea continues to advance the economy, and a lot of Africa's just remain in crisis. These basically failed states. Look at Nigeria. It's a failed state. All this oil pumping out of the country, and there's no electricity. The people don't have any water. There's no food. The people are cold, hungry, sick, and illiterate. It's a failed state. In Eritrea, you got free education. You got free medical care. Nobody's starving, right? And it's getting better, okay?
The basic fundamentals, the basic necessities of life have been provided for the last 20, 30 years. And now we're going to the next phase of development. And I think that's what a lot of Africans are going to be learning from us. At least that's what you have to provide. And, you saw the whole Niger thing with the United States. And, there's a lot of activities going on in Africa. But one of the person here was asking was, he really wants, obviously he's an Eritrean American. He wants to see a good relationship between the United States and America. However, all of us do, but do you think that the administration that is in power right now in the United States and its cronies from maybe many years ago are responsible for what has been going on in Africa? And people are maybe starting to see right through the eyes of that. And maybe, do you think change will come in this country? Do you think there's a possibility of maybe better relations between the United States and Africa through a different administration, different thinking, different ways of dealing with, with African nations?
Well, the reality is international law is the law of the jungle, and only the strong survive. So the Eritrea is strong, they survive. The Americans just recently, there was a UN Security Council resolution saying anti-Israel, and Americans said, oh, it's non-binding. What? It's like there's no international law. It's a joke, right? But the thing is, the Americans are losing. Things are falling apart. The Houthis have now basically slapped Americans in the face, and the Americans tried to slap them back, and it didn't work. And it's like the Houthis. What? These people the poorest of all the Arab people, the most downtrodden of all the Arab people, can stand up to the Americans and effectively block them from military control of a region. I mean, or challenge them, I should say. So, America's on its back foot, and as things are getting worse. I mean, the war in Ukraine is going very badly for the U.S., and if the eventual collapse of the Ukrainian army is going to be a major blow to NATO and the U.S. control of the region. I mean, the U.S. has done its best to try to basically impoverish the European people at the expense for the benefit of American big manufacturers. And, all this is going to come back and bite the U.S., and it's starting to. America is no longer as feared and the threat that it used to be. And militarily, all of a sudden, people are saying, America's not that strong. They can't even stop the Houthis. Why should we be afraid of them? So, being friends with America is like, okay, being friends with a hyena. Don't turn your back on them, right? Because increasingly they're desperate, they're cornered. And I've always warned that, look, people say, why does America hate Eritrea? Why does America hate Eritrea? Well, how did the Eritrea succeed? They didn't succeed by taking the money from the Americans or taking the political system from the Americans, the so-called Western democracy. They succeeded by doing it on their own and being self-reliant and independent. So America is threatened by anybody that's self-reliant or independent. So, Henry Kissinger, I think he so famously said, to be enemies with Americans is not good, but be their friends, it can be fatal. We don't really want to be friends with America. That's fatal. When your friends, you can turn your back on. Your enemies, you'll never turn your back on. That's always what America wants to do. They want to come in and say, oh, we'll help you with this, we'll help you with that. And as soon as you turn your back, they stab you in the back. That's what they do. Okay, that's just the nature of the system. It's like asking a leopard to change its spots. So be friends with Eritrea. No matter what we want, the reality is America's always going to hate Eritrea.
So there's no possibility of some kind of maybe a better relations going forward. I feel like maybe if a new administration comes in, maybe.
There's bricks that the rest of the world is organizing against Western hegemony. China, Russia, India, Brazil. The rest of the world is realizing that there's no future in this rules-based order when Americans can just change the rules wherever they want. It's got to be international law. It's got to be consistent, and everybody has to respect each other. That's just not what America's all about. So, the rest of the world is stepping away. I mean, when Isaias went to Russia and he made his presentation, when he actually was interviewed, and he said, look, this has been 30 years the U.S. has been waging war against Russia. Russia should have started fighting back 30 years ago, not just when they started in 2000, 2 years back when this Ukraine thing started. So, and Isaias said, you guys, Russia's in a position where it can actually challenge and take leadership in the international movement. And Isaias is very clear. It's like, whoa. I mean, for years, you'll never see any interviews with me on Eritrean government TV or in the newspapers, anything like that. And I finally asked Yamani Gebri Meskel, I said, Yamani, how come I'm always on all these international news channels and my articles all over Africa? How come they're living in Eritrea? How come they never interview me? He said, you're too radical. Okay. I could understand that. Okay, that made sense.
So that's breaking news right there. That's breaking news.
Now, when you hear Isaias Afwerki talking, it's like, oh, Isaias is quote unquote too radical, right? He's finally Eritrea's taken off the gloves and they're coming out and just saying straight out. They never used to mention, the United States. They'd say these big powers and things like that, right? They use code words. But now they come right out and say, no, the United States is going down. Isaias is saying these things. It's like, whoa, okay. So,
do you think the internet is a great equalizer? Everyone, actually, not just Eritrea, but a lot of different parts of the world, they are, a lot of things are being exposed. And one of the things is Information Act here in America. You have to wait 10, 15 years before you get, all the dirt and all that. That's, So with that said, now, do you think that maybe this could teach America a lesson and maybe have it slow down on what it's been doing and maybe kind of concentrate on what's going on at home here in America? Because we have a lot of domestic issues in America as well. As you go to every city, you see a lot of different problems and even societal problems. And do you think that's part of the problem alone? Do you trying to enforce ideas on people in schools and in the way you think, the way you vote, the way you eat, the way you do whatever, all that? People are fed up of that. So do you think all that adds to the other problems, the external problems America has?
Well, the external problems America's having, the defeats it's suffering in the international arena, it's going to come home to roost. They can't keep just spending money like they're spending. They're just printing money. So eventually, people are going to want something for their products that they're exporting to the United States. And, America can't just print money and pay them forever. And so when that happens, I think we're going to see a serious internal crisis develop sharply in the United States, and the chickens will come home to roost. In other words, all this U.S. domination of the world using the dollar to basically run the world wherever they want it's not going to continue that much longer, I don't think. I'd say 5 years, I think the U.S. is going to have. Already you see all these major changes, the Chinese and the Russians not using dollars anymore, and the Arabs are making deals with the Iranians, and everybody else are now exchanging yuan, Chinese currency, for their directly. So the U.S. is not going to be able to continue dominating through their dollars, and they're militarily, they're losing it too, right? They're not able to dominate. They can't even dominate the Houthis. So, this there's still, the hyena still got sharp teeth. And as they get more desperate, they're more dangerous.
Right.
So,
If we could
never
talk
turn your
about
back on them.
the SWIFT, the SWIFT, which was denied to Eritrea to do business, to sanction us, to do anything, to like make us not survive. And now with BRICS coming in, do you think that maybe even like the US is going to start opening up? I mean, saying, hey, well, you know what, like, we see what you're doing. And, a lot of development cooperations are starting to happen with Eritrean, Italians, Europeans, also, with Asian countries, with Russia, with China. So do you think that's going to change the game for Eritrea?
Well, President Isaias was just in Italy for extended visit, and he made a lot of industrial contacts to help. He wants the Italians. The Italians, the industry is quality. I mean, the Chinese come to Eritrea, but what they bring is not that quality. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. It's just that with the Chinese, their aid is just not that good. I mean, as the factories from Italy are some of the highest quality in the world. So Isaias knows this, and he wants the Italians to come in and help build the Eritrean industry. I just had a post on Twitter last week. I said, Italian, high-ranking guys in their cabinet are saying we're going to have an economic relationship with Eritrea. But how are they going to do it? Because you can't transfer money from Eritrea to Italy or back and forth. I mean, you can't send money into Eritrea. You can't send money out of Eritrea. The Americans are using these threats of money laundering to even restrict how much money you can bring in cash out of Eritrea. I mean, it's like, how's this going to work? Well, maybe Italy, or they're going to join BRICS and they're going to do the transfers to the Chinese or something. I don't know, but it's really good if Italy could come into Eritrea. But I'm really kind of wondering with the SWIFT blockade, the money transactions, how's it going to work? Because, I mean, even Caterpillar had to pull out of Eritrea because of U.S. sanctions. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Right.
I'm writing this article about 70 years of U.S. covert war against Eritrea. It's continuing. The U.S.
When do you expect to release that article so our followers can?
Well, hopefully by the weekend.
Okay.
I don't want to go too far out on a limb. Sometimes you don't want to, predict things that are going to come back and bite you. I've learned the hard way about that. But the continuing these economic sanctions. I mean, the monetary blockade and other things. I mean, the Chinese can pay Eritrea directly, because they have their own monetary system. But if you're the Italians, you have to operate under SWIFT. How are they going to do it? So that's a good question. I mean, but I don't know if people outside are really interested in the potential things they could get involved in directly inside, because I've got a lot of information on that I'm hopefully that we can do something at the Eritrean Festival, because we'll definitely be there in August, and because I can answer questions in depth at that time. But I wanted to give people something to chew on, to think about before then, so they could figure out where they're interested in. Because look, economically in Eritrea is a socialist country. They don't call themselves that, but the reality is they are. I mean, all the land in Eritrea has been nationalized. Same like in Cuba, same like in North Korea. Okay, that's a hallmark of socialism, right? But they don't say that, but that's what they are. I mean, the difference is that Eritrea inherited an economy that was based upon the private sector. I mean, 70% is agriculture and almost all that small farms. So, this is a private, small scale, is not a socialist economy. So, but the government's been expanding, into agriculture and in the industry and other areas like that. And so, the areas that are possible to invest and work in Eritrea, and there's other areas I just don't think are going to work. Okay, the areas that I think the government's encouraging is agriculture. Okay, that's right now, and there is real possibilities. The other area that's got great potential is in the aquaculture and wild fish and
Fishing.
mariculture. And then, of course, there's tourism. Now, tourism I have put at the bottom because of all this instability in the region. The government doesn't really want to have a lot of visitors coming. There's too much security problems, okay? But in agriculture, okay, personally, if I was in Eritrea and I wanted to invest in Eritrea in agriculture, I'd look at Gatalai, because it's the soil is much richer than Gashbarka.
Mhm.
I mean, the crop yields are 40% higher because Gatalai doesn't have as much rain as Gashbarka, so the fertility is higher. Now they've got the huge Gatalai dam. You can irrigate. You can have 2 crops a year, okay? And it's only about a little over an hour from Asmara by car.
Right.
And there really isn't any malaria in Gatalai. Maybe a little welcome or dengue fever, but you know, you're not going to go down there and get sick and die from anything. You're not going to have to go down there and take medicine all the time. So, and
well, if we talk about public health in general in Eritrea, the public health sector has been incredibly. I mean, you know, obviously we've met the Millennium Developmental Goals, but in terms of public health in general, we've proven to the world that even with COVID, if you remember, obviously with the you know, goods coming in and out, all that aside, in terms of containing the COVID, I think we've done a great, incredible job of maintaining it. So I think public health was a big part of our priority, and also education. And you're talking about agriculture, food, you know, feeding the people. So that phase again has seen its great days, and now it's actually going in the right direction up top. So,
well, you know, I way back I wrote an article, defeating malaria one mosquito net at a time.
I remember that. Yes, I remember that.
The Eritrea doesn't need all these vaccines. You know, Bill Gates is going to vaccine it maybe 20% effective, and they want you to pay for it all. You know, no, it's mosquito nets, and not just like the World Bank, give 1 million mosquito nets away free. In 3 months, you have to go back and treat the nets, or they don't work anymore. You're going to get bit, you're going to get malaria. So they set up a barefoot doctors program and go out and get everybody to continuously treat your nets. If you don't bring them in, they go to you and make you treat your net. Okay, so Eritrea's, you know, they've got that track record of putting their people first. Primary care.
That's what they call the threat of good example, right?
Right.
That's the threat of good example.
Primary care first, you know. I mean, these are human rights, the basic human rights: food, water, shelter, education, and affordable, accessible medical care. These are the human rights. These are what determine whether you're a democracy or not whether you have elections, you have freedom of the press for those who own the presses. I mean, this is like, you know, Eritrea is doing the real human rights, which is the right to life. Okay. So part of that's development and the right to make life better, right? And Eritrea is working hard on that. But the outside, historically, the diaspora, the people are listening to this, because in Eritrea, they can't listen to this. There's no internet. I mean, WhatsApp is about it, right? I mean, even email, you got to go to a hotel or something, right? Even then, it's kind of hit or miss. So, you know, I mean, other than WhatsApp is Facebook and YouTube, and some people have access to maybe high speed, but most people, no, forget it. You know, it's like WhatsApp, that's it. So,
right.
You know, but so in terms of internet, excuse me, you know, this is outside, and what can outside do? The outside, historically, the diaspora has been critical to Eritrea's survival. From the arms struggle, the funds that were raised in the diaspora played a critical role in supporting the arms struggle and to success. And then even through all these difficult times, to the invasion by TPLF, to the drought and all this climate disaster that's happened to Eritrea, it's been the diaspora that contributing the 2% that's really kept Eritrea alive.
They did try to kill that, but it didn't work out because you know, even American diaspora, you have to pay taxes. So America does it too. But with that said, I want to see that question that's on the monitor. African education and health system is socialist. Do we have a better option? That's what somebody's asking. Whoa. Thank you for that contribution.
Well, I think they're kind of confused with what socialist is, because if the country hasn't nationalized all the land, then they're not socialist. So, you know, the word socialist is thrown around a lot, and it's not. To be accurate, you have to certain signposts that you have to recognize. If those aren't in existence, then this country is not socialist.
Right.
So, I mean, the nationalization of the land is one of the primary first steps that has to be done, right?
Right.
And how you develop the economy after that, you know, because Eritreas have a lot of private sector, more than Korea or Cuba, but Eritrea's, you know, what Eritrea is doing is basically socialism. I mean, it's putting the people's welfare first. And that's what
Absolutely.
democracy is. It's social equality, right? Like Isaias so famously said, we want a rich Eritrea, but we don't want rich Eritreans, right? I mean, a rich Eritrea without rich Eritreans. Think about that.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, yeah, great idea. I think that's that's the goal. Okay. So, Isaias doesn't want people from outside coming in and getting rich.
Right.
He wants them to come in and contribute, right?
Right.
There's two ways you can do that. You can do that by, joining the rest of everybody, going to Sawa and getting a job wherever they send you in the National Service Program, or you can come as an investor, right? So, like, the government's saying, okay, agriculture, come and invest. And there's been a lot of that in Gashbarka, but it's pretty tough environment, you know what I'm saying, to live in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But,
No, well,
like
again, I think everything goes with the territory, and I think also we have to look at countries like Sweden, Norway, the Scandinavian countries. Their system is similar to a lot of that they're considered socialists, and a lot of people don't talk
they
about
call
that.
themselves socialists, but
Exactly.
I mean, it doesn't matter what you call it; it's what you do,
Exactly.
right? I mean, if you've got social inequality and it's getting worse, not better,
Absolutely.
then you're not socialist. You're not headed towards socialism. That's what's happening. I mean, it's like everywhere you go in the Western world, the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer,
Right.
and that's not socialism. That's not even headed towards socialism. So, I mean, it's like, okay, they can say whatever they want because people, the word socialism actually used to be a dirty word when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But now it's like, we talk to most young people, it's like, yeah, it's a good idea. In the United States, at least, you know what I'm saying? But they don't really understand what it is. And that's why Eritrea is a threat of a good example, because Eritrea is a practicing socialist country that has a private sector, but Cuba and North Korea, they don't have private sector, right? So, but Eritrea has a private sector, and Eritrea has support from outside, which is critical. Eritrean people in diaspora.
Right.
And, Cuba and North Korea, they don't really have that, right? So, Eritrea is kind of like walking on 2 feet. You got the diaspora and you got the people inside. And, together, the country is going to get built and be the threat of a good example that could, I don't say could, it's going to transform Africa. I mean, Isaias Afwerki is now being recognized as a brilliant international quality statesman who really knows what's going on. And he's speaking directly to what's the problem is that's been basically U.S. and Western hegemony. And he identified that and said, look, man, this is the big problem. There's a war going on here. And, there's a covert war being waged against Eritrea, but there's a real war being waged against Russia. And the Americans are talking about preparing for a war against China. So, I mean, this is sort of an insanity built into the American leadership right now.
Absolutely.
And, it's like where this heads, all Eritrea can do is hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And that's what Eritrea is doing. I mean, when they take all this money and they build all these dams and water reservoirs, I mean, getting close to 1,000 water reservoirs. Some of them, 9 of them are huge.
Right.
And everywhere they're building, everywhere possible, they're building water reservoirs. They're preparing for the worst, which is possibility of extended droughts hammering the Horn of Africa again, but this time not 2 years, maybe 5 years, 6 years, or longer. And they got to survive that. And the only way they're going to survive it if they have water conservation, because water basically means food. So
it's a lot better than building bright buildings and
high-speed internet and all that stuff. No, don't invest in that. I mean, as frustrated as I got in Eritrea, I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to the Imperial Hotel to use the internet when it worked, where I could do email, read a few HTML websites.
Right.
Of course, I realized that there's more important things than internet. I mean, people, you've got to provide for the future. And food security is part of national security. And without national security, what have you got? So, towards that end, I mean, like I was talking about agriculture is food security. Right. So, to support food security in Eritrea, what is the first agricultural product that Eritrea imports? Sugar. The second one is cooking oil. Okay, so in Gatala, you can grow canola seed, and there's a canola seed, there's an oil factory in Maitemnai and Asmara can produce cooking oil for Eritrean people. They don't have to import it. And so, we could go down, Eritreans could go down with serious capital, could go down and plant canola and harvest it and interchange it with wheat and canola with the irrigation from the new Gatalai Dam. They could grow 2 crops a year, 1 crop canola, 1 crop wheat. The planting machines and the harvesting machines are identical. And they've already tried, back in when I was first starting in agriculture in 2008, we imported some canola seed from specially bred for Australia, the Tatami variety, with 40 degrees centigrade weather and 300 centigrade, 300 centigrade milliliters of water, millimeters of water a year in rain, and it grew successfully in Gatalai. So, this is canola. It's a very healthy oil. It's very useful. It's after second best oil for you, actually, after olive oil. So Eritrea could become self-sufficient in cooking oil, food security. You don't have to import any cooking oil by Eritreans developing in Gatalai. Another area that Eritreans could do a small-scale thing is soybeans and soy milk and tofu. I mean, right now, it's still Som in Eritrea, right? People are fasting. And everybody's hurting for milk. You can't drink milk, right? But soy milk, I don't know. The soy milk you get out of a carton and the soy milk when you make it yourself fresh, it's 2 different soy milks. It's like really tasty. I mean, we used to make our own soy milk in Eritrea. We used to import the soybeans, but they've actually, the Swiss ambassador's wife got Isaias to plant a bunch of soybeans about 10 years ago, and it all grew really good outside Asmara. So you can grow soybeans. You can make tofu, which is really good meat substitute. It's getting popular in Ethiopia. You can make soy milk, which is not just good tasting, but it's good for you. It's good for women that are going into menopause, and it's good for all kinds of things. And it's tasty. You could fermentas could have a soy milk, soy bar. And you could, over 4 months a year or more, Eritreans are vegans. Right? Not all. I mean, the Christian population.
Yeah, right.
And you're not, you can't drink cow's milk, but you can drink your soy milk with your bun. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. No. That's a great point that you raised, and I think
you see, that's a small scale thing.
Right.
That's a small scale thing people can do individually. You might have an uncle or an aunt that has a fermenter, a small shop, right? Lateria. Yeah. And you could go in there and help introduce soy milk and soy tofu. Right. Fried tofu is really tasty. I mean, you freeze it first, slice it up, freeze it, then fry it, and it comes out crispy and really tasty. You put a little awazi on it, and it fills you up, okay? Yeah. I mean, this is something the Eritrea needs because it's a good, healthy protein, okay? And, just like canola, one of the byproducts of canola after you press the oil, because it's very rich in oil, you get a protein-based, what's called press cake, 40% protein, animal food.
And you're talking about experience. You've experience with this, right?
It's animal food. And see, it's just like we could produce animal food from what's called black soldier fly. It's a huge industry, fastest growing industry. South Africa's got a factory that produces 5,000 tons a year of animal food from black soldier fly, which is already present in Eritrea. I went out and found some in a manure of a dairy farm. So this, in like 10 days after they lay their eggs, you start producing the larvae. The larvae can be fresh to feed chickens, or you can dry it and use it for animal food, including aquaculture food. Eritrea could not only be self-sufficient in aquaculture food and animal food, but could export just from black soldier fly. This is something that can be done on a small scale in the village, or it could be done in a factory of 5,000 tons a year, something that Eritreans in the diaspora could come and help set up. Right. See?
And how about the fish sector?
Right. Well, the fishing now, fishing is 3 aspects of fishing. One is the wild fish. The second is aquaculture, where you raise fish. And the third is mariculture, which is shellfish. Okay. Now, sustainable wild fish, you can't really catch them with nets and hooks because you catch a lot of the big fish, which are the prime egg producers. You don't want to take the big fish. Anything over 3 or 4 kilos are mature fish, and they produce the eggs. You want to get them under 3 kilos, okay? And the nets and hooks catch the big fish, and that damages the resource. The only really sustainable way to catch wild fish is through traps, which is labor intensive, but you get a very high quality fish and you get the very tasty fish, 1 to 2 kilos. You design the trap with the entrance size so that the small fish can get out and the big fish can't get in. The fish that are 1 to 2 kilos get in there. Those are immature. They don't lay the eggs, and the more you take of them, the smaller fish don't get eaten by them. More you have smaller fish grow up to bigger fish. And this is the most tasty variety. A 2 kilo grouper in Jeddah goes for $12 a kilo. That's $25 for one fish.
Wow.
Okay, you can grow a fish cage, 10 meter by 10 meter by 5 meter deep. That's 500 cubic meters. You can put 500 grouper in there, and those grouper you feed them with fish food made from black soldier fly and from the leftover canola cake, and mix it together in the feed. And in 6 months, those grouper are 1.5 kilos. That's 750 kilos in one 10 meter by 10 meter by 5 meter fish cage. And if you can export those to Jeddah, that's 750 kilos in 6 months. In a year, that's 1,500 kilos. At $12 a kilo, that's 18 grand from one cage. You see what I'm saying? And these, you can put hundreds, if not thousands, of these cages all across Eritrea, because Eritrea's got the best conditions for aquaculture in the world. One, marine metabolism is determined by two things: temperature and salinity. Eritrea's got the warmest, saltiest water in the world, so it's got some of the highest marine metabolism in the world. Two, Eritrea doesn't have any big storms that come in and damage your aquaculture infrastructure. And two, it's got 5 rivers that come down the ocean, up down to the Red Sea from the highlands seasonally, bringing all the siltation that stimulates algae and phytoplankton production. If you go off to Gergesum Beach, you see all this muddy beaches from the river that comes out just north of Gergesum. The currents take that mud down the coast into Massawa, and that mud stimulates the algae and phytoplankton production. If you swim outside Green Island, sometimes the water just looks milky. What's this water milky? This is phytoplankton and algae. It's some of the richest waters in the world for phytoplankton and algae. And it's a steady current 24/7 bringing phytoplankton and algae, which fish like erebi or mullet and milkfish thrive on. Okay, they're filter feeders. So you can feed the fish, or you can have filter feeders that you don't have to feed. In 6
You're also
months,
giving us a little science lesson here, and
right.
our viewers are loving this. And so
In 9 months, an Arabi
Yeah.
grows to 1.2 kilos without being fed.
Wow.
Okay, so in other words, you get 600 kilos out of a 500 cubic meter fish cage. You do have to change the size of the nets. So every month, you have to change the size of the nets. And you have to go clean the nets from the seaweed that gets plugged up in them. And, that's a job that 3 men can take care of 40 cages a week. Okay, so 40 cages a week, that produces like a fortune. And this is jobs for Eritreans, right? So, this is like aquaculture. Okay, then there's mariculture, which is shellfish. Okay, maybe in the West, Eritrea, it's haram. Oysters, no, you don't eat oysters in Eritrea, right? But outside, oysters are premium. In oysters and scallops, Eritrea has what's called honeycomb oyster. The outside of the shell looks like a honeycomb. And they grow huge. It's a 3-year crop, and they're delicious. I know, because I used to eat them, right? And then there's black scallops, and they're like huge scallops, and they're really tasty and sweet, okay? These shellfish go for $30 a kilo in Europe, okay? And then there's lobster. Eritrea has this lobster paradise. The lobster in Dalak Islands is the green lobster. The red lobster goes from Gila south to Assab. And it's just untouched because it's haram. Nobody eats lobster. Even the Tuareg people, the Christians and the Muslims don't eat lobster. Okay? So nobody eats it. It's just untouched. It's an unexploited resource. I've estimated there's at least $100 million worth of lobster that could be exported from Eritrea every year. $100 million. Now, we have a relationship with Italy. The Italians love lobster. They'll pay you $30 a kilo for it. We can catch lobster wild and keep it in Massawa in cages, put it on the airplane once a week, and fly it to Asmara. Lobsters can be packed in wet burlap bags. They survive 24 hours that way. They don't have to be in water. So you could fly these lobsters to Italy for $30 a kilo, and you pay about $5 a kilo to fly them there on charter flights. So, I mean, we could talk about that's just Italy, and from Italy it can spread across Europe. In China, for Eritrean spiny red lobsters, they pay $60 a kilo, and we've got, I mean, tens of thousands of kilos sustainably harvestable in Eritrea. Okay, so lobster is what you'd call a wild fish. Okay, right. So you've got aquaculture, raising fish you feed like groupers and milkfish. You've got filter feeders, mullet and arabi. Arabi and grouper and jetta go for the same price. It's really tasty. It's Eritrean. This mullet is really rich. I mean, you cook it on a fire, the fat drips off the mullet into the fire like hamburger when you're in the United States.
Hopefully, during the festival, you can elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, this is what these are. Yeah. I want to tip people. We could get into all this because these are the areas that the agriculture, the soy and the canola are things that the government would welcome you immediately. Okay, small scale and large scale, and soybeans. I mean, you can even use them for animal food, right? So, it's like in the United States. So. But fishing right now, it's a little bit in the doldrums. It's just like artisanal fishing, and right now I don't know if the government will eventually open it up, but it's something that, of course, it takes investigation and preparation before you don't just jump in both feet, right? So I mean, if you're gonna do fishing, you're gonna live in Massawa, and you're gonna be there for 6 months of the year, where it's like 40. Right. You got to be tough to handle that, right? So you can't just run away and say, "Hey, I'll be back in October when it cools off." You got to stick around, right? So, but
thank you for that conversation. As the time is going on, we also have another gentleman with me, Matkal, who wants to maybe chime in and ask some questions. Sure. So, Matkal, if you're there, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, Thomas. How are you? So everything you're touching is, somehow one way or the other is related to me, from fourth chapter, Honolulu, to agriculture and energy. So yeah, there is a lot of potential in Eritrea, and if you abbreviate it, if you use it as abbreviation, E stand for energy, A for agriculture, T for technology. And if you have those, you truly can sustain life in its organic or authentic way. Saying all that, but I'm going to drag you to one thing that happened recently. As you might know, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, he was in Beijing, April 8 and 9, and he met with Wang Yu, and also he met with President Xi Jinping. So there was a press statement that was released, and it was, it caught my attention, and I'm going to read it to you so you can analyze it. So what it say is like, not the whole thing, but I'm just going to, make a little point on that. The Chinese foreign minister and at the end of the meeting, they said China and Russia never conspire to attack a third nation. If NATO or Western power attack either Russia or China, they will come to their aid and fight for them. And also they say, on behalf of any fight for them on their behalf of, they also said Russia and China will come to the aid of nations who subjected to attack from Western threat threat of international security. So pretty much what they are saying is like, it's not only if the Western countries touch China or Russia, which they have a bilateral agreement on security and military, but also other country where they have national interests, like Eritrea, like North Korea, like Cuba, all those defiant states. if they are attacked, we will come for their aid. That's what they are saying. So how do you see it, and how do you analyze this?
Well, Russia's just their navy was in Massawa, right? And so the Russia's made it clear that they're going to be working with Eritrea's defense forces. That's a very positive thing for Eritrea. So like you say, it's a law of the jungle. Only the strong survive. And Eritrea has to keep up the speed. You can't just sit back with 1970 model Soviet Union tanks. You got to get up to modern warfare. So Eritrea is always going to have to be strong militarily. And China, see, Russia is right now is like leading the fight against Western hegemony. China's sort of, playing a sort of a backseat role, but they're realizing that they're increasingly under threat by the United States. I mean, that's where the big fight is, let's wash our hands of Ukraine and let's go take on China in the United States leadership right now. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, whoa, these guys are crazy, but this is where they're headed. So, Eritrea's got two big superpower friends that are supporting Eritrea. It's a very positive sign that China and Russia's finally starting to, especially Russia, is starting to recognize Eritrea for the role model they're playing in Africa. And that, in a strategically critical part of Africa, the Horn of Africa. So that's a very good sign. And I think they're going to see not only militarily, but economic support as well, because the Russians are going to come in and help Eritrea develop their energy resources. Down in the South, back in the 1960s, the Americans had a big gas discovery, and it ended up catching on fire and burning down and collapsing, and they just sort of gave up. But I mean, there's gas in Eritrea, there's oil out in the Red Sea on the coastline, you know what I'm saying? So Eritrea should be more than just self-sufficient in energy. They should be able to export energy. And the Russians will help with this. This is what the Russian specialty is. So one thing about Eritrea and under Isaias' leadership is they're never in a rush. They're going to go very slowly, very methodically. And it's going to take some time for all this to happen because, Isaias knows you rush into things, you get in a problem. So I don't expect things to happen real fast or overnight, but, this is where things are headed. And this is the positive sign. So, when it comes to energy for the diaspora, I mean, if you're into exploration, if you can go out and get some experience, I'm sure the Eritrean government will welcome you with open arms. And they have their own mining program in the university, but, nothing, the book learning is one thing, the practical experience is another, right? So right now, the mining pretty much is all being done by outsiders. Exploration, Alpha Exploration, and others are doing. There are Eritreans there doing exploration, but there's the Eritrea, the African Nubian, the Arab Nubian Shield is big swath of that's in Eritrea, from Barentu all the way up to Nakfa, and up into Sudan is one of the three major mineral deposits on the planet. And so this has all got to be explored. I mean, almost none of it's been explored, just starting to, you know what I'm saying? So exploration is a big deal, and there's gold and base metals and other things up there that can help make Eritrea rich. So, Russia can help with that. Russia is very good at exploration. So, the Chinese aren't really into exploration that much in Eritrea. It's more like the outsiders, right? The other, like Alpha Exploration is basically run out of by British and Australians, right? New Zealanders. So, these are people that have been all over Africa for 30 years and got a track record. I just want to put a plug in real quick. I hate to see Eritreans miss. Like a lot of people missed on Bisha. Bisha was at one point was trading at about 50 cents a share, and it went up to like $6, right? So Alpha Exploration, which has got this major gold mine, probably millions of ounces of gold, is trading still about 65 cents a share. And I estimate it'll go up to at least $4. And Eritreans outside can trade there on the Toronto Stock Exchange. So it's under ALEX, Alpha Exploration. You go to TSX, TorontoStockExchange.com, and punch in, search ALEX, and you'll come up with Alpha Exploration, or you can just go to alphaexploration.com. And, this is like a potential. I mean, could be a big game changer. If we got a multi-million ounce gold mine in Eritrea, I mean, that's in gold's like going up and up and up. It's at 2,400 an ounce now. I mean, just in 6 months, it's gone up 30%. And it could easily go up over, 3,000 an ounce. And if they got millions of ounces up there, they're talking about billions of dollars. And, it's not like So, I mean, it's like this is another big game changer. It's not like a copper mine is going to bring you in a couple $100 million a year. You're talking about a gold mine that's going to bring in, $1 billion a year. And that kind of money for a small country like Eritrea, and and Eritrea's outside can take advantage of it. It's just a gamble. You don't make that kind of money without a risk, right? But the people that are doing it have got a track record. The people, Alpha Exploration was the ones that discovered the Asmara mine in Ebadurho, and they're the ones that discovered the Zara mine up in Karshbarka. And so this is their latest. The people that making these discoveries have been in Eritrea over 20 years. So, or the people that started all this. So, this is like these guys are track record guys. And so I'm pretty confident. I don't think I'm misleading anybody taking a risky investment. But in any case, China and Russia are superpowers, and they're working closely together, and they're starting to recognize Eritrea, all very positive things.
That's a great opportunity. If I can interject, your analysis of this whole stock going up, it's happened with other things in the past. I've had friends who bought some stocks and they waited 4 or 5 years and went up really high, with the Bisha and other things. But with that said, in Tigrinya, I want to emphasize, the website that you gave us, Alpha, whatever it is, we'll try to get more Eritreans to get involved in that and get something out of what they put in now. It's going to double up and even quadruple up in the next 3-4 years. So that's a great, and we appreciate you telling us that, because a lot of people don't think like that. And so
$6,000 get you 10,000 shares of Alpha Exploration, and those 10,000 shares could go to $44. That's $40,000, and I'm expecting this within 2 or 3 years. So I mean, what's $6,000? I mean, it's not. Most people can afford to lose that. It's not going to break the bank, right? So, and it's like the potential to have a nest egg there. Of course, you got to pay capital gains tax in the United States.
Right.
Hey, when they say Eritreans shouldn't have to pay their 2%, hey, I had to pay. When I sold my gold mine shares, I had to pay capital gains tax, and I bought the shares when I was in Eritrea, and I sold the shares when I was in Eritrea. I didn't even live in the United States, and I still had to pay 15% of my profit to the American government. Eritrea is only paying 2%. Why? Right. You know what I'm saying, and the Americans say we can't do that. It's like I say, it's like a rules-based order. They make the rules, and they play by whatever rules they want.
Double standard. Go ahead, Metzger.
Yep. Now I'm going to put you in a spot, and probably it will put you in a hot seat with a bunch of people that you know. But I have to say it because I share this with you as well. Living 15 years in Asmara or in Eritrea, one of the most respected and the most intelligent diplomat of Eritrea is who to you, on your opinion? I'm just
well, who do they call the Pele of diplomacy? The Pele, the famous soccer player?
Yes. Yeah.
Who's the Pele of diplomacy? Yamani Gabriel. That's brilliant. I mean, brilliant. I mean, if Usman Saleh's outside, he's either with Isaias or he's with Yamani. You know what I'm saying? Of course, Wedi Ephraim is another brilliant. He's the secret diplomat. Sabarat Ephraim, we call him the secret diplomat because he's the guy that works behind the scenes. But he's another brilliant diplomat. But as far as being a diplomat, Sabarat Ephraim mostly you've seen as military, right? But Yamani Gabriel, I mean, you have to say that he's brilliant.
Yeah. And then the other question that I have is when a government cannot provide a basic necessity such as school, medication, clear water to drink, and those basic necessity, if they cannot provide, that means it is a failed state, which we are seeing nowadays in a lot of Western countries. But there is this word they use, and I know the true definition of that, which is it is a self-determination, but they put it under democracy, and everybody, they say, in pursuit of democracy, you see them like throwing a stone and doing this and that and that and that. But truly they don't seem to understand the meaning of democracy, because democracy is a self-determination. It is not an end game. It is a process to where you want to be. So can you elaborate and or analyze it a little bit better, or what is your idea on that one?
Well, I've written about Western democracy a lot. I've written about what real democracy is. You can look it up in the dictionary. Democracy. Democratic means social equality or striving for social equality. In other words, if you don't practice social equality, or if your goal is not to reach social equality, you're not a democratic government. So these guys can take the word, they can bastardize the word, they can steal its real meaning and claim they're democratic when they're not. None of these Western countries believe in social equality. None of them are progressing towards social equality. They're moving away from it. So none of them are democratic. Eritrea is moving towards social equality continuously. Like Isaiah said, we want a rich Eritrea. We don't want without rich Eritreans. We want social equality. Okay, so, that's what, I mean, if you go back to like the traditional Marxist, what is socialism and democracy, socialism is from their ability to each according to their work, in other words, they contribute. And the next step is supposed to be communism, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Okay, but right now, socialism is like, you got to work, and doctors are going to get more than people that clean the streets, right? So, but that's a transitional point, and that's sort of where Eritrea is at right now. You know what I'm saying? They're working towards making everybody so that everybody has a good standard of living. Everybody's what you'd call rich, but nobody is rich. You have a rich lifestyle, but you're not rich. In other words, we don't want rich people. We don't want people with excessive accumulation. Why do you need more than one house? You know what I'm saying? Well, of course, as a true Asmarino and Eritrean, I want a house in Asmara, I want a house in Massawa, right? Because when it's hot weather in Massawa, you got to flee to Asmara, you're a climate refugee. When it gets cold in Asmara, oh, the beach in Massawa is shukur, right? So, you know what I'm saying? But one house, what do you need more than one house? What do you need more than one car? What do you need more than, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
if I could add, the culture itself in our country, as Eritreans going way back, is that we're not very greedy oriented people. I think people are very giving, people are very supportive. And so I think it fits in very well with what we're doing. That's why it's also, I believe the Eritrean people are successful, because we'll give our life. I mean, many people have given up their lives for the nation. I mean, the people who had great lives here in America went to Eritrea and gave up their lives and their everything that they own. So I think in that sense, we are put in a better position than most in the world. But having said that, though, like you said, yeah, why is it important to have 3-4 houses? Why is it to have the glamour? Why is it to have all these things when you don't have a neighbor who's not eating a daily meal? And that's a mentality that I think the world has to approach what Eritrea is doing, and it's our choice. It's our people want to do that.
I tell a story about, I went to back to the U.S. in 2019, and I was back in what you see in America is, if you see a dog on the streets, no time flat, the dog police are there, the Kelby police are there arresting the dog and taking it away, right? So dogs can't be on the street. No, that's not allowed to have homeless dogs. But people are sleeping in the streets everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Everywhere you go, you see people sleeping in the streets. You go to Asmara, you see Kelby everywhere, but you don't see people sleeping in the street, right? I mean, I see packs of Kelby running around Asmara sometime. Whoa, it's kind of, what is this? But nobody's sleeping in the street. Maybe some mentally ill guy sleeping in the street, and maybe a day or two, they find his family and they take care of him. They don't let people live like that, because Eritrea is a humane society. It's a socialist society where the people come first, and that's the priority. And that's why it's so important that the Eritrean youth outside understand just what the difference is between Eritrea and the outside, because the Eritrean youth have got a major role to contribute from outside, to help modernize the country, because inside the country, the people are struggling. Life is hard. The people outside can get the education and the practical experience to come back home and contribute, right? So, but, again, Eritrea's still got problems. I mean, they got a bureaucracy. You've got people that just, sort of fed up because their salaries are real small. Life is hard. And they fought in the field all those years, and they thought they were going to have a better life than this. And so there's kind of morale problems in the bureaucracy. And it's sort of natural, being all the hardships the country's gone under, that people would feel that way. But I think Eritrean people inside are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. They're starting to see that, hey, this isn't going to last forever. We don't just have to hope to God that life is going to get better, but we can actually see it's coming. So I think the youth has got to start preparing for that. So I think the discussions like we could have at the festival in August, we could get in depth about certain areas that people could start doing more research on. People could go to Eritrea and see firsthand what it's like in Massawa, what it's like in Gatalai, what they could do, what they really can't do, and what's realistic, and how the contribution you can make that's not gonna turn sour, where you can actually be successful.
We have about 10 minutes before we do 2 hours, so I think we took some questions from the public. Matkal, if you could say some last minute words, and we'll have Thomas wrap it up with his amazing interview. We hope to hear some great things from him coming forward. The articles he's been writing. We like your engagement, your connections, your ideas. Always add a lot of value to our Eritrean communities. So with that said, I want to go ahead and give you the mic, Matkal, and then we'll wrap it up with Thomas saying his last words.
No, you said it very well. And if I try to say something, then I'm going to mess that up. So I absolutely agree with Mike. And I really appreciate everything you do and everything you've done and everything you're going to do for the future. So we can take some questions and then go from there, I guess.
Okay. We've taken some. We took about 3, 4. So anybody who has questions, post them on the screen here, or you can call us.
Or they can call, they can call Solo.
Yeah. Solo, if you can come back up, would be nice.
Okay. خدولو تخليهم مالتي حتون دحر دادا هل يكون كوينو 3 سبات كل 3 سبات كنقبلينا. Thank you.
While we're waiting for calls.
بدنا حمدو اسكا عنتو يحطو متيات كان يرى مسلني مدكل. كميتريوز ابدغز يقبر
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. Solo.
Okay, Mike, go ahead. You heard it.
No, Thomas, one of the questions that we have a huge following here. People are close to 150,000 subscribers here. And so what they want to hear is also from you. How do you feel about this nonsense groups of people coming in, trying to claim to be oppositions, creating all these problems in the festivals, and they're called Brigade Nahamadu or whatever you want to call them, Brigade Adgu or
Adgina Amadou.
Adgina Amadou. All right. So tell us a little bit about how you feel about that.
Well, they're basically a lumpens from Tigray. And of course, Eritrean lumpens that have joined up with them, but mostly lumpens from Tigray. I remember being up in Germany in 2015, and my nephew there was hired as a translator to go around and help translate in the refugee centers with Eritreans. And we got there and we went around to a few places, and it was like a third of these people were Tigrayans. They weren't Eritreans. So, I mean, okay. Oh, and then 2016, I actually went up to that town in the Netherlands where they attacked the festival with the YPFDJ gathering. I went there after the fact and walked around and met people and talked to people, interviewed firsthand, and saw this was just a bunch of gangsters that are being promoted by people like Ron Risen and Martin Plaut and these other, I call them liars for hire, people that are getting paid or were getting paid to basically slander Eritrea and to organize, in these cases, organize violent attacks against Eritreans. Okay, so, the Eritreans have got to, I'm always trying to say Eritreans expect the worst from these people outside, because don't trust the police. You got to rely on yourself. I mean, it's good to get the police involved and get these guys arrested, maybe thrown out of their countries, but, but don't let the blood flow before that has to happen. Organize and hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Because these guys are gangsters, they're thugs, and they're lumpens, street boys that are, look outside looking for, it's part of their culture. It's not looking for some excitement. They think they're going to get some action and maybe make some money. I mean, you know, the Eritrean opposition has sort of went bankrupt when the war broke out with Weyane. I mean, when the Weyane coup in 2020. Since then, it's like, whoop, a lot of people have turned around and seen that Shabia is the way forward. People that before were saying things not so nice about Shabia now are like, whoa, we regret that, and publicly saying that. So, you know, it's a good sign that the Eritreans outside, you know, and inside can accept these people back into the Eritrean family. That, you know, okay, you made a mistake, you admitted it. Okay, welcome back to the family. So, you know, that's sort of for Adgi Nahamadou. I think, you know, we should expect more things like that. But I think, you know, with the collapse of the TPLF, I think, you know, there is TPLF, a lot of TPLF money outside, but I don't think their top people are going to want to part with, you know, and get associated directly with these thugs that give them a bad name. So, I mean, you know, like Tedros Ghebreyesus Adhanom, he's a TPLF thug. He's a gangster, and I've written extensively about him. And you know, he stole billions of dollars when he was one of the top 4 guys in Ethiopia. Right? Absolutely. He ran off the country when he saw the handwriting on the wall that Weyane wasn't going to last. And he fled with his billions, and he's got it stashed away outside. And there's others that have got a lot of money stashed away outside, but what are they going to do with it? That's the question. I don't think they're going to run a share. They're greedy guys, and they're really corrupted. I mean, if they think they can cause problems for Shabia, for Eritreans, they will. But right now, I think we'll see this next festival season how much, you know, how well organized these Adgi Nahamadou is going to be, if they're going to come on attack, and how well the response will be. Because I think the police are sort of like, whoa, we don't want this sort of terrorists, because they end up attacking the police as well, right? So I mean, they're not popular with the police right now.
Right. Same organizations that are creating them are now shying away from them, because we said it, but nobody wanted to listen to us because of the point of view, right? So with that said, I think we have touched on many issues. We are absolutely thankful, Thomas Mountain, the independent journalist, the proud, I don't know how to say it, an analyst and proud Eritrean supporter, solidarity, and Eritrean, honorary Eritrean. Yeah, no, you're an honorary Eritrean. You're
Enriches. Oh, you're Thomas, an analyst. You're Tom Quality.
Tom Quality. Well, we really appreciate it. We hope to see you again in August.
Mike,
thank you very much. Yes.
There is one question that came.
Okay.
It is regarding to the WHO pandemic agreement, and why is WHO and especially Tedros Adhanom pushing the pandemic health agreement to have it signed by 194 countries? And why, I mean, how do you see the Eritrean government without any vaccine or anything? They they passed the pandemic, and even when you see the casualty was so little in Eritrea. That's the question, if I would summarize it.
Right. Well, I've become sort of a vaccine skeptic more and more so as it started to emerge that a lot of people have been killed by this vaccine. So Eritrea, I think, was very smart not to get involved with the vaccine, just use basic public health matters, to control it. I mean, the lockdown was pretty severe, not as bad as it was in Europe, but I mean, they were very careful about, trying to prevent transmission. And then they had a very active identifying and tracing and getting people help so that they didn't lose a lot of people. But, there's going to be more of these too. I mean, I think there's going to be more of these outbreaks, and it's starting to appear. I mean, people like Jeffrey Sachs was head of the Lancet Commission, very prestigious medical investigation, said that this looks like it's a man-made virus, and this was like a lab-made virus. When the head of the Lancet Commission saying that, you got to start paying attention. So I think there's going to be more of this. America's got a long, nasty history of biological warfare. They carried stuff out against Cuba, where they introduced dengue vaccine, dengue fever, and other things into Cuba through mosquitoes, literally dumping mosquitoes out of airplanes over Cuba. They introduced a swine flu virus that killed half the pigs in Cuba. Cuba had to quarantine half the island. So Fort Detrick has got a history here in Maryland, close to us, of biological warfare research. So, and so I expect Americans, they're getting more desperate. I expect them to do some pretty crazy things in the future. But, because look at all the biological research labs they had in Ukraine. What? It's like all this stuff is conspiracy theory. No, not when Jeffrey Sachs is appointed head of Lancet investigation, says this is a lab-made virus. I mean, this guy's a major player, and it's like you got to take it seriously. Americans have been up to some nasty things, and it's going to be a future of that, So, I mean, and Eritrea being careful. I mean, it's one of the reasons I don't think they want a lot of tourism. They want a lot of opportunity for bad things to come in the country. But so yeah, I don't know. I have had 3 vaccine shots, and I've known that people that had all these vaccine shots and still got sick and still gave it to other people, and were extremely careful with masks and hygiene and everything else, and still got sick. So the vaccines, now they're admitting, after first claiming that the vaccines prevented you getting sick. No, they don't prevent it. Then they claim that, vaccines prevent transmission. No, they don't prevent transmission. Okay, so vaccines maybe prevent some people from dying from it. Okay, well, Eritrea didn't take a chance with vaccines. They just said public health, and it was successful. So I think that's another, thread of a good example, right? Because some people got really rich off this vaccine business.
Absolutely.
Please make you one question.
Yeah, go ahead, Solo.
Okay.
I think we got a caller. You're popular, Thomas. So while you're saying that, while the phone is coming in, the disease that you're talking about that was spread, it happened. I was reading a book a few years ago about Hawaii and how they did that to a majority of people in Hawaii in the old days, and destroyed people through a disease. And that I found very fascinating. The indigenous people of Hawaii, that is. And so, like you said, the history of using, disease is not just, it's not something that just started recently. It's been around for a long time.
Deliberately and not deliberately, it's just been Hawaii. Just the people have been so isolated for so long, they didn't have any natural resistance. So when these sailors were infected with all kinds of disease showed up, they just went through this, just a common cold and measles and flu and everything just went through the population, wiped out 90% of the population in 50 years.
Yeah.
The same thing happened to American Indians. I mean,
right.
Some of them were deliberately infected, but it just, there was great advanced civilizations. The League of the Iroquois was a functioning democracy, and they, with elected leaders and all kinds of things, and they just basically died out under this, not from militarily, but from disease. But Americans have always, done just the whole history of. If you look at the crack cocaine pandemic that started in South Central Los Angeles, it was started by the CIA. It's like all these major turned into international crimes that started off with somebody in the U.S. National Security Establishment, which we call one of the names of the various CIA and State Department and other people. They're, they've started so many crimes and then got out of control and turned into international problems. So I'm always very willing to take a second look at anything that people say that says the Americans did something really bad, because I've seen so many really bad things the U.S. has done.
Oh, thank you very much. On that note, again, I want to say, really, really a pleasure having you here. Nice catching up with you. It's been a while.
We'll see you guys at the DC Festival.
Absolutely.
And it'd be good if we could, sit down in a room. Yeah, get people organized and set up in a room, and we can sit around. I'll be there for a few days. We could even informally just continue this discussions about people's special interest.
No, that we're gonna do in a very deep manner. But the question that I'm getting here is, they are asking, are you referring the BSL-4 laboratories around the world? And also, what is you know, like if anything like this happen in the future, what kind of advice would you give to the people? What do they need to do to protect themselves? Because even the vaccine, the way I see it, it is for emergency use only. Emergency use only is for somebody, like in a dire situation. But administrating everybody, it damage a lot of people. And at the same time, there is a lot of reports which I'm going to share with you. I'm going to send you email. When they were administrating the vaccine, they were not doing it the right way, because you have to put the needle, and then you have to aspirate the needle, and then that's when you know it is in the vein. Instead, they were giving it in a muscle, so it was affecting a lot of people from movement and stuff like that. So what kind of advice would you give to people? That's the question another person asked.
Well, that's sort of like medical stuff, right? So that's not my field. I follow it, and I follow it closely, but I'm not really that expert on it.
No,
So,
I absolutely understand. I'm not a doctor. Also, I'm not in medical field. I'm in other field, but it's just opinion.
Well, this is an experimental vaccine they developed. It's based upon new technology, never been tested. Very scary business, right? So, personally, I believe in public health. Simple stuff like, transmission from sources and other things, touching things, breathing things, maybe staying away from people when the virus is raging. So those things are, but Sweden didn't shut down, and they didn't have it. Actually, they had it less than most of the other European countries. So they didn't have a lockdown. So, it's like there's a lot of things to study about this that's going to come out over the years. And it's, a lot of things are going to turn out to be, because we know Fauci and these people were liars, right? We caught them in lies repeatedly. So I don't, it's like what they say about Eritrea: don't trust anything you see or read in the Western media, because it's all, you know what I'm saying? It's liars for hire spouting this stuff. That's another phrase. That's another phrase, I coined: liars for hire.
Liars, yeah. I love it.
Okay, well, whatever last word he have, and thank you very much for everything, and we will continue this engagement in the future, and I cannot wait to engage more with you.
Yeah, people can follow me on Twitter.
Yeah, can you give them your Twitter handle?
Thomas C. Mountain on Twitter. Yeah, I kind of keep up latest up there.
Okay. Some other Eritrean, كلكم Thomas C. Mountain.
That's not me.
On Twitter.
That's not Thomas Mountain there.
Of Twitter كتروحوا تدخلوهم.
Is that me? No.
That's you. That's you.
That's me. Oh my God, I get old, didn't I?
2006.
Tomas Arigit.
Any last word, Mike?
Yeah, well, we want to say thank you again and again. You've always been around for us, and we appreciate your knowledge, your ability to dissect stories of geopolitical importance. With that said, have a blessed day. Thank you very much. We end our show with this. Say hello to your family, Thomas, and see you at the festival.
Hey, I went no hafash.
All right. Wadina solo Wadina.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, look, send me the link so I can put it on my Twitter page, okay?
All right, we will do that.
Hey, this is 2015 in Geneva.
The economy's going to go. They're not going to stay there forever. And when they do, our economy is going to really...
Hey,
in liberated territory in Eritrea in 1978. She married Dan Collin Nakba. So she is very intimately knowledgeable about the ins and outs of Shabia, of EPLF. And she found out very early on she couldn't buy Shabia, so she went to the TPLF. And she's the one particularly responsible for the career of Meles Zenawi. She found Meles, she promoted Meles, she turned him into a blood-soaked killer with the support of the U.S. And she was one that eulogized Meles Zenawi at his funeral, got up and spoke openly about her over 30-year friendship with Meles, who's probably one of, if not the most brutal killers in African history. So she's Obama's special counsel to Obama and a senior director of the National Security Council. Her office is right next door to Obama's office. And she spent 15 years literally in the trenches in the Horn of Africa. She's very knowledgeable about all the ins and outs of Eritreans, about Ethiopians, and she's telling Obama what to do. So she's the one that's pulling the strings of the UN. And she's now been nominated to head the United States Agency for International Development. His primary job is to provide cover for undercover CIA agents in the third world and the guise of bringing aid. So she's going to be around for a long time in a very dangerous position. We'll have to keep an eye on her. And even when Obama's gone, we've got Hillary Clinton coming in. Now, Hillary's not particularly smart. She may not become president because she isn't that smart. But if she is elected president, she's well known for loving revenge. She's very vindictive. So if she doesn't get her way in regards to Eritrea, which she won't, she's very dangerous. She could do really crazy things. So, you know, like I said, it's good to know who your enemies are so you don't turn your back on them. And it's good to have America as your enemy because they're very dangerous as your friend because then they can stab you in the back. So having America as our enemy is actually a good thing, not a bad thing, because that means we're doing something right. And it makes our life hard, but on the other hand, you know, Eritreans are no stranger to hardship, and it's better to be independent and to develop your country independently than to become a slave and kneel down to the United States, which is what the Americans demand. So, well, we all know that well, you know, I spent a lot of the year in Massawa because I'm from Honolulu, Hawaii originally, so I love the ocean. So we were hoping to start an aquaculture industry in Eritrea. So we want to develop that into, the Eritrea's probably got the best conditions in the world for aquaculture. And we could grow many, many thousands of tons of fish every year in aquaculture there. So, you know, there's a real future in Eritrea. I mean, we're going through some tough times still. You know, we've been having droughts 5 years out of the last 10. And we've got this economic sabotage the U.S. is carrying out. On the other hand, someday Wayani's going to go. They're not going to stay there forever. And when they do, our economy is going to really start to grow fast because when we have peace with Ethiopia, we'll trade with them. And they were historically our biggest trading partners. So there'll be jobs for young people to come back to someday. And it's just a matter of time. It's not if Ethiopia is going to change, it's a matter of when. So we're all looking forward to that. We can't say how soon it's going to happen. In the meantime, somehow we just got to stick it out. And, you know, like I was talking about, we've got this climate disasters. We call it climate change outside, but for us, 5 years of drought. Can you imagine in Europe, if in the last 10 years, 5 years, all the agriculture in Europe failed? All these governments would be in crisis, and they're rich governments. We're a poor government. We've been invaded by Ethiopia, economic sanctions, and we've had drought 5 of the last 10 years. So, you know, times are hard, and I understand that it's difficult to be patient when you're young, but, you know, it's going to pass. Okay, so, you know, it's like the Europeans are at fault themselves for all these people coming here. You know what I mean? So, it's one hand, it's like the Europeans are sort of puppets for the Americans, and the other hand, there's reason for why the youth are leaving. I can't, you know, say that everything is fine in Eritrea. Life's hard. There's no question that a lot of Ethiopians, Sudan, even they're coming from West Africa, say we're Eritrea because they know they get over. A lot of Sudanese.
بدأت أقول لكم زوجي ده في زركة